Tyler. How was your birthday, Obi?
It was good. I had a good time.
Nice.
Me and Joey got a tree together.
Cool.
Yeah. And yeah, just hung out. It was just my no meeting day. I'm like, okay, that's my gift. No meetings. Whatever works. Tyler, you should be able to share now. We're all set.
All right.
Recording is starting.
All right. I'll call the meeting to order. Call the Bend MPO Technical Advisory Committee meeting up to order at 9:04 a.m. And we'll just do a quick check to see who everybody's. I see on my screen I've got Sharon Smith, Henry Stroud, Karen Swirsky, Andrea Bro, Greg Bryant, Liza Hamada, Brian Potwin, Dave Thompson filling in for Rick Root, and Rick Williams. Oh, and I see Joe Viola just came on. Am I missing anyone else?
Hey, Tyler, I'm here too.
Oh, yes. So we have David Amundsen here and Robin Lewis as well.
I don't see any other TAC members at this point.
Okay. Just a minute. Kobe, do you want to talk to this, or we think everybody's pretty good in terms of?
I'll just do it for the record to make sure. So virtual meeting guidelines, we're all pretty comfortable with them, but just a reminder that you can raise your hand and we will call on you at the best break we can. Also, please use the chat function if you need any help with anything here. I will be here to help you. We'll be recording the meeting for note-taking purposes. We're also, not really on the slide, but YouTube live stream is also going right now and will be available for public as they need it. Good. That is it. Next slide, Tyler.
All right, so now we'll just jump back into the STBG funding discussion, and I will, I'll stop sharing my screen, Andrea, and then you can pull up the spreadsheet.
Yeah, so I just want to give since we're picking up where we left off from our last meeting, I do want to give a short recap of what we had covered at the last meeting to get to where we are now. So if you remember, we reviewed the results of the application criteria-based ranking, both from the TAC overall as a group and from staff. We compared those. Both ranking results were very similar, same top 5 projects, same bottom 3. I'm reiterating that the ranking is just one tool for the TAC to use in developing a funding recommendation. After that, the TAC had a very lengthy and detailed discussion on every individual project. Specifically, this centered on other considerations that are not included in the application criteria, but still extremely important when evaluating projects for funding. So things like timing and readiness of projects, looking at costs versus expected benefit, or the level of impact of the project. Also, discussing availability and likelihood of other funding sources. So from that point, staff then presented a possible funding scenario, one that the TAC could start editing to eventually come to consensus on a funding recommendation for the policy board. And by the end of the last meeting, the TAC did come to agreement on the first 2 years of funding. So at this point, the TAC will be working on those final 2 years of funding for 2023 and 2024, making changes to the scenario to come to agreement on what projects will receive funding, how much, and when for those final 2 years. So with that, I'll go ahead and share my screen here.
There you go. You should be able to in just a moment. And while Andrea is doing that, I wanted to let you know Toby Marks from the City of Bend just popped in as well. So for attendees, he is also on the call now. Welcome, Toby.
So question for the TAC. So this is where we left off. You see the darker green, 2021 and 2022. A motion was made to approve those first 2 years of funding. And now we need to work on 2023 and 2024. Would it be helpful to open the screen that shows all of the original requests in their original years prior to looking at this these last 2 years as an initial scenario?
I don't think so, because it's shown on that column.
Right, for the total requested originally? Is that what you're referring to, Sharon?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if others would like it, that's fine. I don't see the need for it myself.
I had a question, and maybe this is a question for Casey. You know, the relaunch bike share Bend originally had requested what was that, 365,000 over several years. Do they still feel that 30,000 in 2023 is going to be useful towards their effort, or do you guys understand what I'm saying? Like, is that money going to be meaningful for them given the stark difference between what the revised award would be and what their original request was?
Henry, I don't have Casey on, but we do have Toby, who's the applicant. Toby, do you have a sense of that request?
Yeah, I think that, well, it would, if you, $30,000 in year 3 would be great. We would just align our planning with that. 30,000. So I've tried to be before a little bit more communicate that we're very, very flexible, that this is something that we are partnering with a statewide effort to launch a new statewide bike share nonprofit, and that they would operate the program, and that we $30,000 in year 1 would actually help us launch the program, and we would partner with them, and most likely, if their planning stays on timeline, get this program up and running in like sometime in 21. And then, so all after that would be so flexible, because we know that the history in the program is there with sponsorships, that if we can get the operator going, we are really confident that the program will run after that. And so it's really that seed money that we were hoping for a little bit more to get the program restarted. So I think the timeline would change now, which means that we might get scooters on the ground even before this, before bikes, which would be interesting but weird. But yeah, I think, would it be good? Yes. Would year 1 pretty much say, if we get year 1 funding, everything else kind of like we are really, really flexible with, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you, Toby. I appreciate it.
So I think another, something that the TAC should discuss is that funding was removed from the 8th Street and Wall Street projects because there is the possibility that it could be funded with other sources. And that said, funding was then moved to partially fund the mobility hub development and, bike share and Juniper Elementary. Any discussion on that? Because again, this is just a scenario. I'll leave that open for discussion.
Yeah, this is David. I mean, I get that we're taking consideration, like we're at a point where we're considering things beyond the scoring criteria, but my recollection is that the 8th Street project scored fairly high. And also the bulk of the public comments we received supported that project. So it seems like I feel uncomfortable seeing it not get any funding when some of the projects that scored among the lowest are receiving funding.
I agree. That's a really important project. If we can figure out a way to give it some money, I think it's it looks good.
And I have just kind of a generalized comment. I'm getting a little anxious that we're getting into the peanut butter approach. We're just trying to spread everything too thinly. And I'd like to see us be able to, fund things fully and get them delivered instead of partially funding everything.
I agree, Rick, but I think for the bike share, it's totally appropriate. They're so flexible. I think that anything that we can send their way is going to be useful. It's not like trying to construct something.
Yeah, good point.
This is Dave Thompson. I think we had some discussion last time about the Bend Mobility Hub development and how these funds are not very targeted, right? I mean, the project's very early and we're just kind of tossing some money in to help out. Personally, I would favor spending the money on more specific projects with defined outcomes, such as the 8th Street type of project. Thanks.
Yeah, this is Sharon. I kind of tend to agree with the goal of actually getting a project constructed and on the ground. And while, I think the Bend Mobility Hub is important and it scored well, there's such a huge need there, and there's a whole lot of other funds that can go to that it seems like if we have such limited funds, maybe getting, this very community supported Safe Routes to School project done is better bang for the buck. Having said that, I also, think that the mobility hubs are really important. I just wonder if this pool of funds is really the right pool of funds to support that.
I think for me managing NSSP, what would help is if the Larkwood project was pulled into 2023, as well as the 8th Street project, because that could be funded with some match money from the NSSP through year 2023. If it goes into 2024, what happens is it goes into the Go Bond pool. And I don't control that. So I'm not, it just gets a little bit harder to manage. In 2023, it's still a CIP project with a city council capital budget. But that would push both projects into 2023, which might be more difficult.
Robin, if both of those projects were in 2023, so you had a $275,000 project, single project, what level of match would the city be able to provide out of NSSP?
So the NSSP with those funding amounts, the NSSP would fund 83,000 for 8th Street and 64,000 for Larkwood. So a good match.
And the total cost is 275?
275. It's the 184 plus the 90. That's not the total project cost.
Oh, okay.
That's the grant request.
I see.
So if we were not able to fund, I mean, that's more money than we would have in 1 year. So if we weren't able to fund it wholly, is there a possibility you could do some matching or get some other funds somewhere else? I mean, what I don't want to do is partially fund both of them and have neither of them go.
Yeah, no, I think that's fine. We would drop the priority of another project to pull this one up and fund.
So I hear that there is that the TAC potentially wants to prioritize 8th Street. Does the TAC also want to prioritize Larkwood?
Yeah, this is Greg. That sounds all good, but I still want the mobility hub to be involved here. I don't want to. I think that's we had that as our #1 priority.
So Andrea, this is Andrea with Cascades East Transit. So just kind of an overview of where we are in terms of other funding sources dedicated to mobility hubs. I understand our ask involves a lot of capital, and it's something that we can't just 100K is not going to solve our problem. So just to reiterate to the group, we did go after stiff discretionary funds on November 1st for mobility hubs, and that's in the millions. I can't say with confidence whether the ODOT or OTC will agree to fund us, but I don't see a reason why not. With that application, we can actually break ground. There's enough funding behind our request. We did have the STG as leverage to boost that overall amount. But we're staying positive, hoping that we're going to get it. The other thing that's taking place is stiff formula, which will be due February 1st. And within Deschutes County, I am presenting to the stiff committees to, again, put in a chunk of capital to break down for mobility hubs as well. I know if my executive director was here, she probably wouldn't like me saying this, but if it really is the direction of this committee that we would like to fund projects that can be completed and not spread too thin to do it partially, I think CET is okay with perhaps not requesting funds for this round, but perhaps in the next, 3-year cycle, we could look to the Bend MPO to fund something particular within a mobility hub that's related to transit, whether it's, let's say a bike share program at the hub, a bike fix-it station, more modern shelters, you name it. But I understand the frustration of what our project does to the overall grouping of projects here. And I'm just kind of putting that out there. So I'm open and letting you say that we're putting about 2-3 million into mobility hubs in the next 6 months. The only thing is we don't know if we're guaranteed those funds until ODOT either says yes or no. So.
And Andrea, this is Karen Swirsky. Doesn't that, what you just suggested, work with the TGM grant? Because it's going to be probably a year before the feasibility study is done, where we would have our first pilot project anyway. So the timing for that money might make sense to postpone?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So, and then for those on the call that understand it's a huge priority, I just want to reiterate that every other funding source out of this is being dedicated to mobility hubs. So there's movement taking place within the next, 6 to 8 months to get some substantially funded with regards to this. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Andrea. That's very helpful, and appreciate your candor. It's always hard to ask for money, and and there's never enough to go around.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
So Robin, as between the Larkwood and 8th Street, do you have a sense of higher priority from the city?
Yeah, I think Larkwood. It's harder to get that one funded through NSSP, and it's harder to compete against Safe Routes to School state dollars, because that school doesn't have as many students that receive free and reduced lunch. And so plus it's a local street. So it doesn't compete as well in those categories. So I'd prefer Larkwood to be funded. I'd prioritize that one. Yeah, I think that would be a really good project.
So are we moving in the direction, and I'm not advocating for this, I'm just asking a question of the group, where we would remove the mobility hubs, the funding for the mobility hubs, and bump Larkwood up to 2023 and then potentially fund 8th Street in 24? Is that kind of the direction we're going?
Sounds like it. Yep.
Sounds like what you do is partially fund 8th Street, probably in 2024.
Well, you get 180.
On Henry's question, because that was going to be the next question I was going to ask the group. Does the group agree to remove the funding from Bend Mobility Hub development, and then we can begin discussion on where those dollars would then go?
I so move, if that requires a movement.
Second or agree, whichever.
Anyone opposed to that? I guess I should ask.
My only thought, and this is, I'm not opposed to it, I think generally that's the consensus of the group. My only thought is, if we end up getting some additional funding, which it sounds like we may, I'd like to bring them back as for kind of first consideration. And maybe at that point, there might be a specific project that we could fully fund.
Sounds a great idea.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. And well, first and foremost, I appreciate Andrea and CT being flexible on that, because I know how that is when you're in the beginning stages of a project and trying to bring money in. And I think they have a tall order ahead of them. I do like the idea of considering funding at a later date once they've done some sort of feasibility, and maybe they have a little bit better scoping on what some smaller one-off projects may be to support that larger effort.
And just so you understand, Henry, that is the intent of the TGM grant that we got, is to figure out that stuff. So we, in a year from now, we should have a lot more concrete projects to put forward.
Yeah, that feels a little better than putting money towards something that at this point is still fairly nebulous.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that, I'll go ahead and delete these amounts. This isn't. I'm just not adding it properly. There we go. Okay.
Are we going to have a balance of 10,000 extra in 2023, and should that go towards bike share?
That makes sense to me.
Yes.
Is attack agreeing that bike share to add 10,000 to bike share in 2023?
I think so.
Yes.
Okay. And then for Larkwood, will that be staying in 2024?
I think the thought was to put that in 2023 and then fund 8th Street in 24.
24, yes.
What about red? Mm. And then if we did,
Then you do 180, 750.
okay. Thank you. I don't know why this isn't totaling here.
And I'd probably add the 750 to the bike share. Make it 40, 750 to make everything equal out.
Okay. Okay.
That's great.
All right. Oh, sorry, I can change this color here. I'll do that later. So with that, with 2023 and 2024, any discussion on this? Is everyone in agreement? Any concerns here?
I think it looks pretty good. I just want to make sure that when it goes, the recommendation goes forward, that we give an explanation of why we removed the Bend Mobility Hub and the other consideration that, you know, we'd like to consider them for future funding when they have more specific projects. Just because I want to make sure it's clear that why we didn't fund something that was a high priority for most everyone.
Yeah, and Tyler and I are going to be getting together on how we're going to present this to the policy board. So we certainly want to have, an explanation for how the recommendation was made for each project.
And Andrea, I can provide some language and specifics with regarding to funding and timing for you. So I can get that to you next week.
Oh, okay, great.
I move approval of the recommendation as presented.
I make a motion to have approval on it as it is presented.
Are you seconding, Greg?
Yeah. A second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Motion approved.
Thank you, guys.
I have a question. This is Cameron. I heard Sharon make a motion earlier that Dave Thompson seconded, and we never voted on it. So was that just trying to get consensus?
Yes, I think that was just a consensus
Okay.
discussion.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so I am going to stop sharing here. And then we can go back to the presentation.
Yep, I'll just give a second to transfer that back to Tyler.
Okay.
Just not letting me get to Tyler here. Hold on. Same as last time. I couldn't scroll down to get him. There we go. Okay. There you go, Tyler. You should be able to do that in a minute.
All right, so you could go to the next slide, Tyler. Oh, you're muted, Tyler.
Yeah, just give me a minute here.
Oh, sure.
All right.
So next steps, the policy board meeting is on the 15th, which is next week. Tyler has been in contact with those will be presenting their presentations. So we will have that happening, and they will also review the TAC funding recommendation. And it is up to the policy board to make that funding decision. I believe that is the last slide for this agenda item. So any other comments or questions on this process?
All right. Move on. So our next item, we just want to give you a quick update on some amendments to our 2021 to 2024 Transportation Improvement Program. Hobie, do you want to talk to this?
Yeah, I can talk to this subject. So next slide, Tyler, we sent out a public notice to our news outlets and interested parties in regards to a amendment to our Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program. We were going to review it on the 2nd at that TAC meeting. This isn't something that needs to be decided on by the TAC, but I wanted to give just some notice and a little bit more detail about it. And then the MPO policy board will review and approve or decide on that amendment on the 15th next week as well. So there are two projects on the next slide. Should be the next project. Here we go. So the first one is a full amendment. It's US 20 between Deschutes River Bridge and Roble Road is what the original name of the project was. It is now US 20 Tumalo to Cooley Road. There is an increase in funding of $8,400,000 from Deschutes County and some funding from ODOT as well in the amount of $1,700,000 from two different sources and projects, just moving things around. With that, it gives a lot of information about the project and increases the total quite a bit. So that's why it is such a full amendment. And if we go to the next slide, we can talk about just a little bit of the comments that came through. This comment was in regards to the pedestrian and bicycle underpass at Tumalo, which was in the design. It went through 30% design at that point and then was not taken forward to final because of additional funding needed. There's a couple slides after this that just talk about what that is, and I was just going to show you that. If there's any questions or comments, we can take them to the policy board, but I just wanted to share this process with you. So this undercrossing that you see on this slide is the concept, and it will continue as a concept through the project according to ODOT's project managers. The crossings at the roundabout will still be available for bike and pedestrian activity. And I know there's been a lot of comments aside from the one that we showed on this presentation, not directly to me, but to ODOT. So we'll probably have a little bit more to talk about on the 15th with an ODOT representative. So please, the next slide shows just a little bit more about what they will be including in the project and what the total cost of this multi-use path is. So as they go forward with design, they'll know that this would be something they could add if more funding was available. I think that is it on this project. Just talking about funding, and like I said, the roundabout includes pedestrian signals. So the RRFBs on the highway, those are the rectangular rapid flashing beacons. So there will be some additional, pedestrian activity. Go ahead.
Hovey, the additional funding that you talked about in your first slide, that does not get you this multi-use path.
No.
It's still considered
correct
above.
Yes. Above this additional funding. Yes, that is correct.
Robin, I can speak just a little bit. You see $200,000 increase from the sidewalk improvement program. So what's happening with this full amendment is two projects are being combined. The 200,000 is actually going into the non-Tumalo part of the project, and it's funding multi-use path that was outside of the footprint of what we call a 4R project. And so with a 4R project, you'd be required to do bike and pedestrian facilities as part of the bike bill requirement, but we're doing an additional section of path to get it all the way up to an intersection. And that $200,000 worth wasn't triggered by the bike bill. It's not a requirement. It's an additional investment in the project.
And David, is that path, that section, is that from Cooley Road to Old Bend Redmond Highway?
Yeah, it's the difference from wherever the multi-use path coming off of the Cooley roundabout ends, the northern terminus of that. It's the extension from that up to Old Bend Redmond.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so I think probably in the next couple months, we'll just have a presentation of this project with ODOT and our policy board or our TAC. So there'll be more information about it, but I just wanted to keep this pretty high level. And if we go to the next one, is just an administrative amendment, smaller, doesn't need to be processed through the policy board, but it is also an increase in funding for a pavement preservation project on US 97 between Nels Anderson and Romaine Village Way. So basically the extent of the parkway in Bend. And that's an increase in funding of $1 million. So that was just the other project. And I think that wraps up my updates through the MTIP. If there's any other questions or comments, we'll be happy to take them now or at another or via email too.
On that last one, that increase in funding for $1 million, that was almost all on preservation.
The project is all preservation. I believe the increase in funding is due to the cost, what the bid came in at. And David, I don't know if you know that or are familiar with this project or not, but I can confirm that. Okay, I will find out. But I believe it was just bidded at a high price.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Are there any other questions or comments about either of those amendments?
I don't see any.
All right. We have any? I don't think we have any just public here. Our next meeting is scheduled for January 6th at 10 a.m. We will try and get you materials about a week in advance of that meeting. And with that, we are adjourned.
Okay.
And I want to make just one final comment. I just want to thank the TAC for all the extra time that they put in for this process. I know it was a lot to review and a lot to do outside of the normal meeting times, and we really appreciate that. And also, it's great to see how well everybody works together. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes,
This
thank
was
you very
a great
much.
process.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.
Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, yeah.